All right, let's get going here, Tim.
Good morning, everybody.
Good
Tim
morning,
North.
everybody. Oh, I'm going to kick off here and hand off to you if that works for you, T.
Yep.
Cool. We're both so used to doing these trainings, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, good morning, everybody. My name is Zach Eichenberger, Director of Products and Services for Controlled Product Systems Group. I have here Tim Nordstrom, Gate Automation Category Manager. Thank you for attending another educational opportunity brought to you by CPSG University. So, in the spirit of National Safety Month, we wanted to offer up some education on gate safety. And these are always some of our most popular online training events. It's always a great time to help our clients limit their liabilities, hopefully reduce some injuries out there, maybe even save a life, if I may say. So looking forward to offering this up. It's been quite a while since we have done a gate safety session online anyway. So we are recording this session. We'll distribute this recording to all those that registered, including some of the post-show notes and contacts and resources, etc., for you. So we'll get that out within the next few days for you. We're scheduled for 2 hours today, so thank you all to your commitment to this. There's a ton of content to cover, um, but this could really be an all-day event. And we have, Tim and I both have done trainings on this where we have spent a whole day on these two standards. But today we've chosen to focus on some critical areas of gate safety that must be understood and implemented as part of a safe automated system. So the standard is much more broad. So please seek out additional education on this topic. There's tons of resources out there. We'll share some of those. Our online training portal, CPSGU Online, has some more thorough training available. It's free to join. Some of the courses do come with a fee, but you should absolutely join CPSGU Online. Get that account set up and peruse through our um, huge library of free training that's there, and will also be some nice CEU opportunities for you if you're certified with the AFA or the IDEA. You might notice here we are now an approved education provider for the AFA. I think we're one of the first, so we'll be talking about some ways that you can kind of automate your CEU submissions through the CPSG trainings and more to come there. So, like I said, we won't cover the whole standard. What we will do is give education and demonstrate a practical approach to satisfying the standards. We try to tee up actual situations that you may face in the field and offer recommendations as the industry is set forth. Okay. What we won't do is give you legal advice. We're not here to suggest how you run your company. We recognize that there are business decisions to be made when it comes to this topic and how you service installations that perhaps were not yours. So we'll talk about some ins and outs or kind of have some open conversation about that. It's not our intent. We're not lawyers. We're also not recommending particular manufacturer's product. This is meant to be manufacturer agnostic. Many manufacturers are shown in the pictures. Again, it's not meant to recommend those products or discourage you from using them. They're purely examples. And these images come from various sources and don't come from a place of judgment, by the way. We might show some poor installations, if you will. Rather, they're just being used for educational opportunities. So please use the Q&A feature. Tim and I will monitor that Q&A tool as we go through the session, and we will get your questions answered. Hopefully, we'll have a little bit of time to kind of open it up at the end as well. Both Tim and I are very passionate about this topic. We've been evangelizing this message since 2000 when some of the more significant requirements entered the industry. In addition, both Tim and I spend time with the AFA and their schools facilitating classes, other organizations at their trade shows teaching these classes. I can tell you Tim loves it. I love it. It's a very interesting topic. And the AFA does a fantastic job education on this topic, as well as others, including the IDA, DASMA, and a few others. So it's important to note that some of this content comes from the IDEA and AFA study guides. Those study guides were curated by the industry leaders working to not only educate its members, but help shape industry standards. So it's important that they be recognized and, quite frankly, applauded for their efforts and commitments to the industry. There are two main certification and accreditation organizations for gate automation, by the way, those being the AFA and the IDEA. We highly recommend and encourage everyone on this call to visit their websites, learn more about certification, and look for an opportunity to participate. We'll provide some contact information in the post webinar notes. We often get the question, well, why do I need to be certified? Who's looking at my certification? Well, your clients may look for certifications, certainly, but for me, the most important part about certification is the process and going through that self-study guide, learning the language, being exposed to topics, and language is important because the vocabulary is used throughout the industry. So if you can get that vocabulary down, you can speak intelligently about those topics. So highly encourage that. Um, as I mentioned, we're a newly AFA approved education provider. So again, look out for some post webinar resources to get your CEOs submitted automatically for you. We know, I got to do mine every 3 years, and it's always a kind of a pain going back and going, finding my certificates of completion and submitting all those. So with that, we'll get to the agenda, and I will hand it off to Tim. So we're gonna again cover UL and ASTM. We're gonna go over these general kind of broader safety considerations. We're gonna talk about some key elements of AFA, application or of ASTM, how to apply those in your design of the systems, and hopefully how to correct improper construction when you come across those in the field or in the wild, if you will. Do kind of the same thing for UL325 7th edition, and then we review some resources. The resources are really critical because we don't expect you to absorb all of this in one sitting. So make sure you take note of those resources and review those post-session. Shameless plug here. In the spirit of National Safety Month, we have a huge promo going on with any safety product that we offer. This is an online only promotion, so you must go through our website and place that order online. Use that coupon June Safety 10 to get your 10% off any safety product through the month of June. Quick PSA, it needs to be all caps when you put that coupon code in. So put it in just as you see there. And again, we'll include some of that information in the post webinar notes. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Nordstrom to kick us off with ASTM. But we got these two standards, Tim. What are they all about? But first, introduce yourself, please.
Hello, everyone. Tim Nordstrom here, Gate Automation Category Manager at Control Products. This industry is basically all I know. I've been in it almost, far more years than I guess I'd like to say would show my age. I'm very passionate about this industry. And one of the things I'm extremely passionate about is gate safety. UL and ASTM, UL's been around 25 years, ASTM is 23 years. Myself and Zach have had the pleasure of teaching these since day one. And if you had told me 25 years later we would still be doing webinars, seminars, teaching opportunities, I'd say you're crazy. But the fact that we have over 50 people on here tells me that there's still a need, that people want to learn about this. When these, these standards first came out, there was a lot of opposition, maybe even a lot of anger. And nowadays it's more about, what do I got to do to make my gate safer? What do I got to do to reduce some liability? I don't want to be that guy that's on the 6 o'clock news. So for a lot of you maybe on here, this could be review. For some of you, this may be brand new. The most important thing here is that if we're unclear on something or you're just not sure, please ask questions. This is your time to ask a question. We may say, hey, hang tight, that's coming up in a few moments. We may save it for the end, but please do not leave here without asking your question or questions. Super important. So that being said, there's two safety standards out there. There's UL325 and there's ASTM F2200. I'm going to present F2200. Zach will do UL. They have a lot of harmony. They say a lot of the same things, but the big distinguishing difference between UL and ASTM is UL is how a gate operator is manufactured. So if you wanted to start your own gate operator manufacturer company today and you wanted to get it UL 325 listed, which is a great idea, this would really apply to you. But it also applies to how that gate operator is installed, how the gate operator is installed. We'll see that in the second half of this seminar. My section is ASTM. After UL 325 was written, they realized there was maybe a few holes or a few things they needed to add. So they created ASTM F2200. And it's differentiating from UL is it's more about the gate itself. Instead of the gate operator, it's about the gate. How is the gate going to be fabricated and installed? If this is an automatic gate installation, how is the gate going to be fabricated and installed? And one thing I want to say here is I always run across companies that all they do is the automation. They have somebody build their gates for them. I want you to know, especially let your supplier know, that whoever is building your gate, if they know it is to be automated, they are equally responsible for these safety standards. They don't get a free pass saying, hey, I didn't put the gate operator, all I did was build the gate. If this gate is known to be automated, they're required to follow the standards in ASTM. Let's move on there. So we have some key learning objectives. As Zach said, I mean, we could easily spend 3 hours here just on ASTM. We're not going to do that to you. A lot of it is what we call stuff in the weeds. It's bar talk when you're sitting around and it's really relaxed. You can really, get into the fine details. But we want to hit the super important things, the things that are going to matter to you every day. Talking about reach, and we're going to focus on slide and swing gates. That's not to say other gates are not important. Of course they are. But in essence of time and slide and swing gates make up the majority of automatic installations. That's what we're going to focus on today. If you have questions about a overhead pivot, a vertical pivot, anything like that, you are free to reach out to me or Zach at any time and ask questions about that. But for today, we're going to focus on reach through, or as they call screening, fall over protection, positive stops, which are very important, and of course, covering any exposed rollers, wheels, what have you. Talk about maybe starting off the process F2200 in the design before anything's even built. That's a great idea, to get out in front of it rather than trying to react to a bad situation. And then if you do have that situation that maybe just isn't compliant or isn't safe, what do you do to fix that? All right, PIPs. PIPs is very, very important. It's a way it helps me. I'm a simple person. It helps me. But go ahead. And what does PIP stand for? It stands for pinch, impale, pin, and shear. If the gate can do this to somebody, then you must perform CPR. Not the CPR you see in the picture, but you've got to cover, protect, and remove. So that gate can pinch, impale, pin, or shear. You either got to cover that, protect it, or remove it. And that just helps me when I'm explaining it to an end user or to an installing dealer like yourselves. If it can pinch, impale, pin, or shear, we got to do one of these three things to correct that issue. I think it really simplifies it. All right. Compliance with the ASTM. What is the purposes of F2200? Of course, we want to improve safety. We're always, long after I'm gone out of this industry, we're going to be trying to improve safety. That's just what we're always going to be doing. Why does traditionally a customer buy an automatic gate? Well, they want security. That's great. We want to give them security, but we do not just to give them security and not, observe safety as well. You don't get to do security and ignore safety, except for some very, very, very unique installations. There are very few of those. We have to balance both. Raise industry awareness. Here we are, 25 years later, I think the industry, Zach and myself are part of that, have done a great job of raising industry awareness. Again, over 50 people on here trying to learn more about this. And this last statement on here is something I truly believe in. If you're going to call yourself a professional, if you're going to call yourself, my career is automatic gates, then you do need to have a very good working knowledge of UL325 and F2200. Do you have to know everything in the weeds? No, of course you don't. I don't know everything in the weeds. I know the people to ask, but you have to have a working knowledge, a good working knowledge. There's plenty of resources for that. We'll see that. My phone is always open, email, text, what have you, to answer and try to help you make a safer gate installation. All right, other than this fantastic webinar that you're on today, where can you learn more information? RTFM. For those of you that don't know what that stands for, it means put whatever letter you want for F manual. Read the full manual. The gate operator manual is the Bible. Whatever the gate operator manual says, that's what's going to be held most likely accountable in court or with the attorneys present. If the manual says this, then you need to do that. You can't argue with the manual. The good news is in the gate operator manuals that are UL325 listed, they've all copied and pasted the same information. So whether you use brand A, brand B, brand C, the information is exactly the same. There's not a difference between installing this brand manufacturer and that brand manufacturer. So read the manual. Great information there. Another company I highly recommend you go to is dasma.com. They have hundreds and hundreds of data sheets that take the subjects of ASTM, of UL325, and break them down into very, very smaller parts so that if you have an architect, if you have a GC, if you have an end user that says, why should I be doing these? Why are you, proposing these safety measures and the other person I'm getting a quote from doesn't? This helps give you some, very good ammunition of why you're doing this, and they put it in very easy to read, simple terms. I strongly suggest you visit dadma.com. They have PDFs that you can print off, send to your customers, that this isn't something you just made up. And then lastly, if you're bored at night, you can actually buy the ASTM document. I don't know, some $50, $100. I don't recommend you buy it, but if you want, you certainly can. You certainly could buy it, and you could go to this website right here and buy it if you like. But the manual and DASMA have everything you need, plus this webinar. All right, let's get into the meat of it. So for the next little bit here, we're going to be talking about all automatic gates, a slide gate, a swing gate, a vertical pivot. It doesn't matter. Today, we're talking slide and swing. But for right now, I'm not talking about sliders or swingers specific. It's both types of automation, doesn't matter. And the first one is what they call fall over protection. Very, very, very important. It's unbelievable how many people get hurt, seriously hurt, in both slide and swing gates, believe it or not, that fall over on people. So the standard says a gate, when it's detached from its supporting hardware, cannot fall over more than 45 degrees. I'll probably say this several more times. What I really appreciate about the committee that wrote ASTM and UL, they went out of their way to not tell you how to do your job. They wrote a very vague and specific set of rules here. Gate can't fall over more than 45 degrees. It's done at that point. How you do that is entirely up to you. We've got examples here in photos because I think photos, speak loudly, worth 1,000 words. These are not the only ways to do things. These are just some of the ways to do it. So again, don't take these pictures as literal. They're just options, but gates cannot fall over more than 45 degrees.
Tim, can I make a comment here?
Absolutely.
This also applies to manual gates. There are some manual gate ASTM standards, but who cares about the standard? The fact is that manual slide gates can kill and injure a lot of people, especially slide gates, but swing gates as well. We've got some firsthand experience with swing gates falling over and injuring installers even. So try to apply some of these standards to your manual gates as well. A second point is Tim brought up the industry and the creation of the standards. To dispel a myth that's out there in the industry, who created those standards? Like there's this big kind of mythical evil organization creating standards and putting the onus on us as distributors and installers. It was created by installers. It was created also in tandem with manufacturers and other industry leaders, but primarily the architects of these standards were installers. So just want to put that out there that, and that's a good thing, right? That's what was important about that, and what's important about the industry being self-regulating is that we didn't create standards that were, ridiculously onerous that required an engineer on every project, right? Or um, made it so we can't create the types of security solutions that we need. So,
Good point. Very good. Again, we're still talking about all gates. There can be no protrusions down the bottom of the gate, also out the leading and trailing edges or out the faces of the gate. Larger or longer, excuse me, than 1/2 of an inch. And if you do have that protrusion, that's a 1/2 an inch, it has to be smoothed over. It cannot be sharp. So we have 3 pictures here. I just quickly want to go through them. The gate on the left, obviously it's a slide gate. There's the chain bracket that extends past the leading edge of the gate, or the leading edge of the gate could be the trailing edge, depending on what it is. That's greater than 1/2 of an inch. That could certainly impale someone, part of that pips. That needs to be corrected. Hopefully it could have been corrected in the design phase. How could you have done that? Build the gate bigger. Just build it a little bit longer. Could have done that. If it's in the field, add a tail to it, what have you. But that is considered a entrapment there that needs to be addressed. If we go to the center picture there, someone put some, spear tips, whatever. They did round them over. I'll give them that. I know this site, this was a problem site with cars coming up and pushing on the gate, causing all kinds of damage both to the gate and the gate operator. And whoever decided to put these spear tips come out. They solved the problem. They did. This gate no longer gets pushed on by cars, but they have created um, a huge liability for themselves. This is at an area where there's children present. Doesn't have to just be children, but they're playing around. They're not paying attention. They're on their bicycles. They could easily fall and impale themselves on one of these. And I don't know how you would justify yourself. I'm not trying to say, they shouldn't have done something, but this was not the right way to fix that problem. Just that's something we cannot have. The far right, the swing gate, very, very, very common to see a gate like this where the pickets extend past the bottom of the gate, that horizontal member there. It's common. It is a violation of ASTM. Easiest one to fix. Couple things you could do. I think the hard way is take out your grinder and cut every one of those pickets off so that it's a 1/2 inch or less and then round them over. Or you could just weld a piece of flat stock or whatever you want to the bottom and call what we call it a new bottom, create a new bottom on the gate. That one's by far the easiest one to fix. Hopefully in the design stage, you don't do that. You don't build your gates that way. Easy one to fix. This is just 3 examples of any type of gate that you can't have protrusions. Allowable protrusions. The big one is our finials, our decorative spear tips, whatever you want to call them, that comes out the top of the gate. There's no restrictions on those. We're going to have restrictions on barbed wire and barbed tape in a moment. But as far as your gate design, you can come out the top of the gate with whatever, fancy ornamental iron thing that you can find. There's no restrictions coming out the top of the gate. All right. This one always gets a little bit of attention. Barbed wire and barbed tape. Regardless of what type of gate you have, barbed wire has to be installed a minimum of 6 feet above grade. So let me exaggerate greatly. You build a 4-foot tall gate, you cannot put barbed wire on that. You just can't. It's got to be a minimum of 6 feet. If you use what they call barbed tape, which I think another fancy way of saying that is razor ribbon. I call it the slice and dice stuff, the stuff that just, literally takes your skin right off. That has to be 8 feet minimum above grade. This might tie into some of the fencing restrictions across the country. I'm not sure, but this is certainly for automatic gates. Barbed wire, 6 feet minimum, barbed tape, 8 feet minimum, slide, swing, whatever type of gate you make. This is one of my favorites and one of my most hated subjects. So let's talk. I don't like reading PowerPoints to people, but the gate must be balanced so that it does not open or close on its own when disconnected from the gate operator. ASTM never says that you can't slide a gate uphill, you can't swing a gate uphill, it doesn't say you can't slide them downhill, it doesn't say you can't swing them downhill. They do not use that verbiage. What they say is when you disconnect the gate, slide or swing, from the gate operator, the gate cannot move on its own. So it does kind of imply that you can't do that. I've seen at least three very unique installations on slide gates where there was a severe grade like this, where they did some very interesting things so that when the operator was disconnected, the gate did not move. I realize this is a huge challenge, especially for people that are in areas where it's hilly. Um, again, I can't give you business decisions on what to do. This is what the standard says. It says when you disconnect the operator, the gate can't move. I'm going to leave that entirely up to you. We can have sidebar conversations later, but that's what the standard says. All right. So what we just covered applied to whether it was a slide gate, swing gate, or any type of automatic gate. We're going to now go into the specifics first on slide gates and then on swing gates. So the next few slides here only apply to slide gates that are automated. Any exposed roller mounted less than 8 feet above grade must be covered. So if you've got a cantilever gate that's got exposed rollers, they got to be covered if they're less than 8 feet. If you're doing a V-track gate, and you've got guide rollers or you've got V-track wheels, they're less than 8 feet, they got to be covered. There's lots of commercially made available covers. You can make your own covers. It's just they got to be covered. This is a very important one. There's an amazing amount of injuries that happen to fingers and toes from these. We've done a very good job as an industry of covering rollers. I still see gates out there that aren't covered. I'm sure I'll see those till, my dying days, but we've done a very good job of doing it. This is very, very important. Any exposed roller less than 8 feet, got to be covered. Here's some examples. Top left, there's a V-track gate. The wheel is covered. The bottom one, cantilever gate. If those top rollers are less than 8 feet above grade, they must be covered. The bottom ones are always going to have to be covered. And then if you do V-track and use guide rollers, they got to be covered. Again, you can make your own or you can buy them that are already pre-made, whatever works best for you and your company. All right, here's a extremely important one. And if we do this on every slide gate, I'm not going to say we're going to eliminate all injuries, but we are going to drastically reduce. And we've done a good job in this industry. What ASTM says, UL says it too, is that on a slide gate, you must design the gate so the sphere no larger than 2¼ inches can pass through that gate anywhere from the bottom of the gate up to 6 feet and along the fence line that it slides. So you got a 15-foot ornamental line slide gate that slides along the ornamental iron fencing. That entire 15-foot ornamental gate and the 15 feet of fencing it slides on, that 2¼ inch sphere cannot pass through. These are some examples in these photos. ASTM does not say you have to put mesh on your gate. They never say that. That's an option. It's a great option. You could weld your pickets closer together. You could infill with wood. This is something that I feel they did a very good job of stating. It's very simple. A sphere no larger than 2¼ inches can pass through the gate from the bottom of the gate up to 6 feet and the fence that it slides on. That's it. It's so simple. Here's some examples, some gates that don't. The one on the left, that is an injury waiting to happen. Extremely large opening. People could really get hurt in that gate. That's one we're trying to, that's one that if I pulled up on that today, I don't know if I'd want to work on that gate. That is just, really asking for trouble. The gate on the right, this always comes up a little bit of discussion. It's hard to see the gate that's in the closed position. I'm going to go and say that that gate, the pickets meet the 2.25 inch. I don't know, but let's just say they do. But what the standard says is the entire gate, this back frame or whatever you call this cantilever gate, is part of the gate, and it must also adhere to the 2.25 inch sphere passing through the entire gate. So this gate on the right is not compliant, even if the pickets across the opening are compliant. Here's another one that's super important that goes along with kind of the reach through. What ASTM says here, and UL has a slightly different version, which Zach will get to, is that if between your gate and a fixed object, what we're seeing in this photo here on the left is the gate support post. If the gap between that support post and the gate is greater than 2.25 inches, that's fine. You can do that. There's no problem, because I believe you have to do that with a cantilever gate. You have to fill that gap so that it's 2.25 inches or less. In this example, it looks like they put a piece of chain link, or you could use ornamental iron. They don't say what you have to do. What they say is if your gap between the gate and that fixed object, in this case, it's the support post, is greater than 2.25 inches, you got to fill it to less than 2.25. How you do that, again, is up to you. If you use on the right there, let's say you set that post there for fall over protection, which is a great way to do it. That's one way to do it. That post needs to be greater than 16 inches. If it's less than 16 inches, you have an entrapment area and you would have to fill it. If it's greater than 16 inches, you're compliant to the standard. I want to make sure everyone really understands this here, because we're going to get to it a lot more in UL. But on a slide gate here, if someone reaches through the gate gets an open command, several bad things are going to happen. One, it's going to take their arm right up against that gate post, but two, it's going to try to pull them in to that gap. So if we if we make the gate so it's 2.25 inches, so harder for them to reach through, and we see in UL, we protect this draw in post, we are going to greatly reduce injuries. So this is a big one here. 2.25 inches is a big number. You saw that with the spacing on the gate as well. Here's just a photo. This is a slide gate that's got two support posts, probably guide rollers up top. If the gate on either side of that to its support post there is 2.25 or less, completely compliant. If it's greater than 2.25, you have to fill it so that's less than 2.25. This one would be one example is you could weld in an ornamental iron picket between them. If it's greater than 2.25, you've now filled that gap. So if it's greater than 2.25 inches, we got to fill it. It's okay if it's more than 2.25. You just have to fill it so it's less than.
Tim, we've got a question here from
Yep.
Murphy, and I'm going to go back to the screening
Yep.
slide. Is there any grandfathering for gaps bigger than 2.25?
Great question. So I'm gonna go just to be conservative. Absolutely, the standard UL came in 2000, the year of 2000. So if your gate was put in before the year of 2000, there sure is. That standard was not in effect. I would highly encourage you to advise your end user that in the past 25 plus years, things have changed in our industry, and that gate should be brought up to compliancy. But yes, if it was put in before 2000, I'll steal a little bit of Zach's thunder. If this gate was put in before 2000 and now it's time to replace the gate operator, no longer repairing it, I'm going to unbolt this gate operator and I'm going to put a new gate operator down. That's considered a June 11th, 2025 install, and the whole entire site has to be brought up to compliance, including the gate.
Yep. Well
Hopefully that
said.
answers the question.
Yeah, not to split hairs, but ASTM was 2002 technically, right?
Yep.
But just to be clear, Tim said it exactly correct. We're going to follow that vintage of the operator, right? And when the standard was in place and what standard was in place at that time. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in UL, right?
Good point. All right, this is a very big one, including, as Zach had mentioned, manual gates, but we're here talking about automatic gates. So not only do slide and swing gates need fallover protection, but slide gates also need positive stops so that they cannot over travel. Again, I know I'm repeating myself. I'm very impressed with how hard ASTM worked to not tell you how to do it. You need to create positive stops in both the open and closed positions so the gate cannot over travel. So not only can it not over travel, it can't fall over. This solves both of those issues here. These are examples here. Again, they didn't tell you how to do it. The one on the right is they just welded a piece of metal onto the V track with a hard rubber bumper. So that's the positive stop. Plus, this gate also does have fallover protection. How you create your positive stops is up to you, but you got to have them.
Yep, well said. And your fallover protection does really no good if you don't have a positive
Positive stop.
stop, right?
100%.
So Michael asked a question here, and we're going to get to this a little bit later, but I do think it's a good opportunity to make a point here. So Michael asked if you have a bump edge or a contact edge on the support post, can the gap be larger than 2.25? We've had this a couple times, huh, Tim? So if I could take one piece of it, I want to drill something home. We have two separate standards. They both work in harmony together to create a safe installation, and at the same time, they are separate. So we must comply to ASTM, and then in the case of a contact edge, we're talking UL. And this was a long time misnomer out there in the ether, if you will, that if I filled this gap, I don't need a contact edge. And that is not the case. You must, ASTM says fill the gap. UL says protect your entrapment zones. And I think the standards do a pretty good job, would you agree, Tim, of saying, hey, there's an exception here. So if the exception were listed, great, we can go with that exception. But you're not going to find an exception to this rule of filling that gap. You must fill it, and then you will see when we talk about UL, you must also protect it.
Let me build on it real quick. This spot here is where the most horrific injuries happen, if not deaths. This is where it happens. So build your slide gate so 2.25 inches or less. Fill the gap between the gate and the support post to 2.25 inches. And when we get to UL, absolutely put a gate edge on that post. Do all three, please. Please.
Wasn't long ago we had a death by somebody that knew how to operate a gate, knew
Mhm.
everything about that gate, and still got sucked into that zone.
Died a horrible death. Okay. Receiver guides, end retainers, whatever you call them on a slide gate that, the gate slides into and kind of holds the gate a little bit more rigid in the closed position. So it might be harder to lift and move it so someone to walk through. We see these on gates all the time. There's nothing against using your receiver guide of choice. What the standard says is your receiver guide cannot protrude into the gate opening unless it's installed 8 feet or higher. Doesn't matter what type you put in, it has to be installed 8 feet or higher if it's going to protrude into the gate opening. The drawing on the bottom left shows how to put in a receiver guide. It's an example, not the only way, of maybe putting in a receiver guide that's far less than 8 feet, but it's behind the fence line. It's not projected into the gate opening where it can impale somebody. So very clear, receiver guides are okay. They just cannot protrude into the gate opening unless installed 8 feet or higher. However else you accomplish that, it's up to you. Perfectly fine. Fallover protection we talked about in the general requirements required for slide and swing. Here's a couple of drawings of examples. Again, is this the way you have to do it? Nope. These are just examples of what you could do to prevent a slide gate from falling over. The picture on the right is a real automatic gate that actually comes, I believe, from the UK, where it fell onto a child, and if I'm not mistaken, it actually killed the child. There's no excuse for a gate to fall over. There just isn't. And I would say that on a manual gate as well. There just is, there's no excuse. Um, the standard is very clear. We need fallover protection and positive stops, then it won't happen. We have
Yeah, well, two comments on this. One is I read this case study a long time ago. I believe they had fallover protection, but it was lacking positive stops. So
There you go.
another key verbiage here that you need to digest, and that is that last part of the sentence, when a gate is detached from the supporting hardware. Okay, so what that is saying, and where it really comes to mind for me, and we had a death on a manual gate, is the kind of half cantilever rollers. You know, that you've got a pipe that's on the fence line and you've got that pipe roller on there. There's this great little tab that's attached to that roller that kind of reaches around the other side of that pipe and does help keep it from falling over. But that's integrated into the supporting hardware, right? So that is really not good fallover protection, number one. Number two is a lot of people cut them off because they make noise. You know, they'll get out of alignment and squeal or rub. So keep that in mind when detached from the supporting hardware.
All of these things, they didn't just pull these out of thin air. There was lots of data that they compiled on injuries and deaths. And there's a very specific and good reason why they did all of it. All right. That was, the down and dirty, the very, very key points of slide gates. Slide gates do injure more people than swing gates, just by the nature of their design. That is not to say swing gates have not injured people. They certainly have over the years. They have a little bit less stringent safety requirements just because of their design. So there's a couple key things we're going to hit. The first thing that F2200 says is try it. Won't forget that. If you install your gate on a post, a column, whatever you want to call it, and the center of the hinge to the rear of that column or the direction that the gate swings is greater than 4 inches, you've created an entrapment zone. It doesn't mean that you can't do that. When we get to UL, you now have to protect that entrapment zone. So let's just take an example like that picture on the right. I don't know, 3 foot wide column, put the gate right in the center of it. You got roughly 18 inches to the rear of that column. That is an entrapment area. There's nothing wrong with that. But what's wrong in that picture is there's no entrapment protection, which we cover in the UL section. So the suggestion, the recommendation by ASTM is in the design phase, if you can, build whatever size column you want. Build it a city block wide. It doesn't matter. But move it so when it opens up, there's less than 4 inches of room between the gate and the rear of that column. In that design phase, you've eliminated an entrapment. So one, you've made your gate safer. And two, now you don't have to worry about another device that you got to put in to protect it. If it's an existing gate, you're committed. If it's design phase, let's try to build that column and that gate so it's at the rear of the column and we eliminate that entrapment. But 4 inches is the magic number here. You can seriously entrap someone there. If the gate, when it's going open, swings against a fixed object, could be a wall. In this photo here, it's a guardrail, but a fixed object. If it swings when it's open within 16 inches of that, and trust me, that happens on a lot of swing gate installations, we have an entrapment area. Doesn't mean we can't do it. Doesn't mean, oh, I can't automate this gate. No, you can. What it means is that gate slot swings up against a fixed object within 16 inches. We must protect it. Generally speaking, we use a photo beam. Nowhere does UL say you must use a photo beam. What it'll see when we get to it is you've got an entrapment and you've got to protect it. A photo beam is an easy way to do it, but it's not the only way. That gate on the right, they have a photo beam. That's how there was no way on that job on the right that they could have designed that system that I can tell where that gate would have come further than 16 inches away from that guardrail. They just did not have the real estate to do it. That's not an illegal gate. That's not a non-compliant gate. That's a compliant gate because they have protected the entrapment zone.
And it's also a great example of the standards referencing each other and calling out an exception. In this case, they reference do both, I suppose.
Yeah, perfect. Fall over protection. This is always a good one. I don't know where, most of the people on this call are from, but I'm willing to bet, one of my, US dollars that we could drive out to 100 gate sites in your area. And of the swing gates, we'd find very few of them, if any, with fall over protection. Yes, it does apply to swing gates as well. We got three photos here of examples of. These are not the only ways to do it. These are just examples of. So when the supporting hardware, the gate's detached from that supporting hardware, i.e. the hinge, the gate can't fall over. Two of these use a cable assembly. I've seen my share of swing gates with that, with the chain welded between the hinge post and the gate. Again, ASTM doesn't say how to do it. They just say you need to do it. Actually, the one on the right, if you want, that's commercially available. You can buy a kit already. We sell the kit if you want it. I'm happy to sell it to you. More importantly, what I really want to see everyone do is provide fall over protection, even for swing gates. It's important. All right. Slide gates. If we were in person, we'd be doing some, I'd point someone out and say, all right, what's the restriction on your spacing on a slide gate? And everyone will yell 2¼ inches maximum. That's correct. 2¼ inches maximum. No exceptions. From bottom of the gate up to 6 feet. No exceptions. Swing gates, all the exceptions you want. There is no spacing requirement. You can build your gate any way you want. We're talking just spacing right now. If you want to have ornamental iron gate and have your pickets, 2 feet on center, go ahead. You want to clad it all in wood, go ahead. Do any design you want in regard to your picket spacing. There are no spacing requirements on swing gate. And think about the reason is we don't have like that slide gate of the shear factor. If I was to reach through the gate, it would pull me in. We don't have that. If the swing gate was to open, and when we get to UL, we're still going to have restrictions on what we call, the 6 foot rule in our access controls. But if someone was to reach through a gate, there's not that shear factor on a swing gate. Doesn't mean people still can't find a way to get hurt, just a lot less likely. All right, so that was our ASTM F2200. Like I said, we had, and Zach and I have done this a number of times. We had a talk this morning. It's like, how many of these we've done, and yet we redesign, the training every single time. And we'll probably do it next time. But what we're really trying to focus on now is where the majority of the injuries are or potential injury spots, how to design for them, how to correct them, and to help you explain to your customer why you're doing these things. Um, I'm going to tell you right now that the reach through, the fall over protection, the positive stops, to me, it's easy for me to sit here in my ivory tower and dictate to you, but those are not up for debate. You've got to do those. We have to. If we do those, we've eliminated many, many of the entrapment and the injury potential. Any questions on ASTM?
I'll also say that one dynamic of training is if we teach you 50 things, you're going to retain a percentage of it. Let's just say it's 25%, right? So the idea of trying to get a little bit more focused on these is, to Tim's point, what are the really important things, or the things that tend to have ambiguity assigned to them, so that if we're gonna remember 25%, we're remembering 25% of the really important stuff. So Definitely, like I say, dive in deeper. Steve asked a question, is the recording going to be available later? Absolutely. We know this is a long session, so thanks for hanging in there thus far. But yes, we will provide that recording. And Galen asked a question around liabilities. I'm going to answer that question. I'm going to open up the conversation about it here in a minute, but we will get to that question, Galen. So, to reinforce what Tim said, if there's any ambiguity about those four things that Tim really hammered on, please ask questions today. Tim offered up his contact information. I'll do the same. Please reach out afterwards or seek out those educational opportunities to really understand these four things. There's a belt and suspenders approach to safety in this industry, right? That's why there's these two standards that kind of work together. And if you were to go review some case studies of injuries or death, you would look at it and go, man, if they'd have done one of these things in combination with one of those things on the UL side, wouldn't have happened, right? I'm not saying to only do one. What I'm saying is if reach through, if that gate was simply screened, it wouldn't have happened. Or if they simply added that one safety device, or they recognized some no control zones like we're going to talk about here in a minute, man, that person would still be alive. So, okay, get through that Q&A piece. Okay. All right, we're going to transition to UL325. So we just spent about an hour talking about gate construction. Now we're going to talk about UL325, which is the standard by which that gate is manufactured. Yes, the majority of that standard, which call it the standard's an inch thick, 99% of it is how you manufacture a gate operator. The other 1% is how it's installed. So we'll go through some of those, again, key elements of installation and abiding by UL 325. You must leave this session understanding how to identify an entrapment zone so that you can protect it. You got to identify and protect that draw-in post. We're going to drill that into your head, draw-in post, draw-in post, draw-in post. The no control zone, understand that, very simple. And what do we need to provide for pedestrian access? As we know, these are not pedestrian automated gates. They are made for vehicles only. So we've got to address pedestrian access. Then we'll talk a little bit more about the resources. Okay. And Tim, if you can monitor that Q&A line, I'll try to do the same. I've got it on another screen, but just bring it up. So I couldn't say this prior to say 2016, but today I can say with really good confidence that these gate operator manuals have the content you need from a UL and ASTM perspective. It's part of the UL process. So if it is a UL listed machine, they go through a process of testing, and not only the gate operator is tested, but the manual is reviewed by UL or another testing laboratory. It could be ETL, or there's a couple of them out there. And they look at that manual to make sure that you've got ASTM safety information as well as the UL information in there as well. So this is your guide, okay? So follow that manual. I always challenge folks, have you read a manual front to back? I mean, I've been in the industry a long time, like Tim, 30 years. And I asked the question one time and then I realized, man, I don't think I had read a manual front to back. So I can't say that I've done it today, but spend some time in there. It's a really great resource. But in these situations where clients are saying, why do I have to do this? Right? That's the first thing I'd hand them. All right. Here's the manual, the gate operator installation manual. You want me to install this per the manual, correct? All right. Here are the safety pages. So this is why I'm doing it. And if somebody ever gets hurt, this is probably going to be the first item that a lawyer goes to and goes, okay, did they install it per the manual? Okay. RTFM. As Tim had mentioned, back in 2000, the significant changes to UL were applied. And prior to 2000, if any of you were around back then, or if you worked on a gate operator prior to 2000, there weren't even inputs to do, say, an open safety device, right? That you couldn't even really do it in a safe manner. So those were the big changes. And I'd say what we've discussed today in terms of ASTM that came in 2002 and the UL content that we're about to talk about, for the most part, it is exactly the same as written in 2000 and 2002. There have been updates, as you can see here, and they continue to update it as the industry needs it. 2016, major changes where we required monitored entrapment devices, and then they realized some language wasn't super clear, a little bit of an update on the 7th edition, August 2018. But I just want to drive that home that the majority of what we're talking about has been in place for 25 years. Okay. All right. What about old installations? This question was asked prior as well. So if I have, you saw, a new standard in 2016 that required monitored entrapment devices. Do I have to go back to my 2014 installation and put monitored entrapment devices? No, you do not, right? It follows the vintage of the operator, okay? So that's really your guide, okay? However, if you service a job or go back to one of your jobs in whatever 2014, you probably want to review that for the standard that was in place at the time and make sure that it is in compliance. And if it's not, can it be brought up to compliance? Okay. There's no UL police out there. Okay. There's nobody running around, um, writing tickets or taking people to jail for a gate that doesn't meet the compliance. Where we're going to have legal issues is if somebody gets hurt. Okay. These standards will be brought up and they will be asking questions about why they have not been complied with. Okay. Not just UL, but ASTM as well. Okay. Get this question a lot. What if my client wants to bypass the safeties? They don't want an ugly edge out there. They don't want an ugly sign on their gate. And they say, hey, I'll sign a waiver. Okay. We know, I mean, this is kind of like common knowledge now that a waiver is of no practical use, right? In fact, it may be an admission of guilt. Okay. That they've signed a waiver. You knew you were installing a gate operator that was not safe, and you did it anyways. In fact, we've done these sessions, Tim and I, and we've had people walk up and after the sessions and go, man, I got to go burn a whole file of these things, right? So just to drill it home, you can't sign away somebody else's liability to sue, right? And even if they're the only one to use the gate while they own that property is going to change hands at some point. So waivers are of no practical use. That's really the main topic. Galen asked a question via the chat, and I can't answer it, but we can kind of have some conversation about this topic. But in the court of law, what is the individual's liability if one is a certified gate designer or salesperson and all of these recommendations are not met? It's a great question, right? So I'm sitting there in the court of law. I've been sued because somebody got hurt in one of my gates and I'm certified. Does that increase my liability, decrease my liability? Um, the answer is I don't know because even if I do know, I'm not a lawyer, so I can't really answer it straight away. In at a lot of the trade shows, we'll do a mock trial. That mock trial was designed by a lawyer, and we talk about some of these things. And again, this is just in open conversation. You need to check with your own lawyer, if you will, but the kind of consensus is it wouldn't matter if you're certified or not. Okay. If the manual said you were supposed to protect these areas and build that gate a certain way, you've got to do it. Okay. They're not going to, You're not going to have necessarily an increased liability due to being certified. They're going to ask you the question straight up, right? To start with, most likely, are you a professional, right? Are you capable of installing an automated gate? Did you read the manual, right? So typically the answer is yeah, yeah, I've installed lots of gates or whatnot. And at that point, they're going to call you out as being the professional and the person that is supposed to protect this gate from injury or death. Tim, is that a fair assessment?
It's 100% fair. Remember, you could do a 100% compliant gate system, better than any gate in the world, and someone could still get hurt in your gate. Someone wants to get hurt, they get hurt. What we're covering here is the areas that traditionally people get hurt on. But whether you're certified, whether you're not certified, you're the person that installed this. Your company is going to be held accountable, regardless. Again, I can't 100% speak to that because I'm not an attorney, but I'm going to say it don't matter. Um, and remember, the landscaper's getting brought in, the concrete guy's getting brought in, everyone's getting brought in. You're just going to be there as well.
Yeah, the other talking point is, have you tried to educate yourself? You're charging money to install this. Have you tried to educate yourself on the safety standards? And so, you know, it'd be a good thing if you did. You're attending this, so obviously you're trying, or you're certified, you're trying. At least shows goodwill. But again, can't answer the question completely, but those are some of the talking points that have come up in some of those sessions. All right. So we're going to talk about how, some of the devices that you would utilize to protect entrapment zones. And we're kind of starting here, and then we'll talk about what those entrapment zones are. You don't need to memorize this, so please don't. Unless you're taking a test and a certification test, you don't need to memorize A, B1, B2, C, and D. But it is important that you understand there are different types of entrapment protection, and you need to apply at least two of these in each direction. You'll see that here in a minute. So let's go through quickly each one of these. I'm sure if you've had any experience in the gate automation industry, you'll already know what these are. The type A is the inherent sensor. So that's built into the operator. It could be several different types of devices that are built into the operator by the manufacturer. Could be current sensing, could be an RPM sensor. In some cases, it could be a hydraulic pressure sensor. But that is what comes in the box, built into the operator as a entrapment device, and they will list that out in the manual as a type of device. Important thing to know about, type A's is they don't come preset, right? You've got to adjust this setting when you install the operator and every time you visit that gate, right? Because hardware wears out, right? It doesn't move quite, that gate might not move quite as well, and you may need to adjust the reverse sensitivity of that system. Additionally, you replace the hardware 10 years down the road, and now this thing's sliding or swinging like butter. You need to adjust the reverse sensitivity again. So every time we go to that site, we should adjust that sensitivity. We should document it. We should take pictures. And that's just a pro tip on how to limit your liability and ensure that gate is in good operating condition.
Hey, Zach,
Yep.
does Control Products, more importantly, do the installers on this call, do they install a Type A device?
They don't install it, but they adjust it.
They adjust it. This is the freebie that comes with every UL325 gate operator out there.
Yep.
It comes with it. It's not something you buy and wire in. It's not something you buy and mount. It is included with the gate operator, built onto it. It could be on the circuit board, it could be a switch, but it's already installed by the manufacturer.
Yeah. And small disclaimer here, I can't think of an operator that doesn't have an inherent, but there could be one out there, okay? And it could be UL listed, right? And they might say, hey, you've got to provide these means of entrapment in another way. So it's not outside the realm of possibility that one exists without a type A. I can't think of one off the top of my head, but keep that in mind. So the other type is what they call a B1. It's a non-contact sensor. Photo beam would be a great example and one of the most widely used types of entrapment protection devices. When we're teaching this for a certification class, we'll say this is your first decision. Try to memorize B1 versus B2. And is it better than other types of entrapment? Well, the good news about a B1 is you're not actually put in contact with the gate for it to work. So that's a good thing. As Tim said earlier, UL doesn't tell you exactly how to protect. They just say you need to protect, and these are the type of devices you can use for that solution. You choose, right? But I don't think this needs a whole lot of explanation. It's a photo beam, sends a little beam of light, either bounces off a reflector or has a sending and receiving unit. It's monitoring how much light is coming back from that unit, and that's how it knows if there's a obstruction. Where does it get mounted? This is an interesting one. It's actually not part of UL in terms of where that photo beam is mounted, but the industry standard is within 5 inches of the gate, preferably as close to the gate as possible, and between 21 and 27 and a half inches above grade. And that's more, hey, we get dual purpose. One is we keep it off the ground so it doesn't get, splashed from rain or it doesn't get covered with snow. We're also going to pick up vehicles. And I'd say within closer to the gate, the better. Now, I said it's not part of UL, but it may be part of the manual. And in many manuals these days, it tells you where to put that photo beam. So we don't, at that point, as installers, we don't care what UL says. We care what the manual says. If this says you got to put it within an inch of the gate, put it within an inch of the gate. So read the manual and go by the manual. That's your Bible.
Hey, Zach, we had a question from Todd, and I'm certain this is in regards to a Type A device. Todd asks, is there a force spec that needs to be met?
It's a great question. Not listed per UL. There's some, if you read that UL manual, you'd find some references in the testing phase of the operator, but for the installer, they have not dictated a force level. You need to use, just good common sense for the Type A.
Would it be fair to say that on your installs, if you're having to max out your Type A, you got something going wrong on your installs?
Probably you've got the wrong operator, you've got some bad hardware.
Mhm.
I would absolutely agree with that. And, if you go up there and you try to stop that gate and you can't, right? That's a pretty good indication that it's dialed up too much. Um, the Type A is, and the reason there's a belt and suspenders approach here, right, is the Type A may reverse, but it may have done some damage, right?
Mhm.
Because that gate's got to hit you. It's probably got to pin you up against something. It may not have great leverage, so it might take a little bit to catch up. And so while the Type A is super important and critical, not to kill, it may maim you in the process. Yeah.
One of the things we talked about on there on the Type A was that it has to be tested and adjusted by the installer, the service tech. I think it's very, very important that you document that strongly. And the reason why is you go out there, let's just say it's service call. You do something, you adjust the Type A, maybe you replaced wheels. So now you say, oh yeah, I gotta really adjust this thing. And you set it at some point where you feel it's safe. A month goes by, a year goes by, you haven't been back to that site. Somebody gets hurt in that gate, and lo and behold, that sensor has been turned all the way to maximum, or the least sensitive. It's set on massive damage control. An argument can be made that if you didn't have documentation that the last time you were out there that you had adjusted it, that you're the one who left it in that position. Because remember, we all have handyman or somebody that gets into these operators or your competitor that comes by behind and says, "Oh, I know how to fix this problem," and they just turn it up. So that documentation and all that stuff is extremely critical.
Yeah, I've heard, good pro tips from installers during these conversations of, checklists, right? And documenting their checklists. You don't have to take a roll of film to the pharmacy anymore. So take a digital image. Those are all great tips. You can't do this on every job, but if you can get service contracts so that you know that you're going there a couple times a year and servicing this gate is always a great idea, not always possible, but those are good pro tips, Tim. Yep. All right, other types of devices that can be used for entrapment protection, contact sensors, right? Everybody's familiar with these. Now with monitoring, you're going to see different types of monitored edges and resistive edges so that they know the gates has entrapment devices hooked up and that they're working. But contact edge is a viable means of entrapment protection, and in some cases, your only option. We'll get to that here in a minute. Here's a great image of a installation. Tim, I think, did you take this picture back in the day?
I was on this site a number of years ago. Yep.
I think you were just trying to buy that lounge back there, but
That's right. Good
so
price.
this isn't a live session, so hard to do these things, live, but it's easier to do them live, quite frankly. But so what's done correctly here and what could be improved? And reviewing what Tim said earlier about gaps, these two gaps on each side of that gate, do they need to be filled? Absolutely, they do. Did they do a good job protecting the entrapment zones with edges? Yeah, they did a fantastic job. So this would be a typical installation out there, I think. They fill those gaps, they're actually going to be compliant for this component of the gate. What could they done? We said we try to give you some tips along the way. What could have been done in the design process to make this less expensive? And that would be to hardwire these two edges on the posts, right? If we could get a conduit chase in there, or route the wiring straight into the operator, now we don't have a wireless transmitter that has batteries to maintain and the cost of that wireless device built into the system. So just one way that we could limit the cost of safety and also eliminate a failure point, which would be a battery.
Looking at this photo again, I love to point out things that were done right. The guide rollers are covered. Did a good job there. You can't see the gate, but you can see the shadow of the gate in the fence, the picket spacing requirement on the slider. They met the standard there. So I want to say, hey, they did a good job. The gaps scare me. I give them all the credit in the world for putting three edges there. That's awesome. It's one of those things, though, I'd like to see them fill the gaps just to solve that problem. And we had talked about, Zach, you brought it up. This is an older gate operator. It was certainly manufactured well after 2000, but it was manufactured before 2018. Didn't even have the inputs that we have today to make those edges work.
Yeah, another component is, we get the question all the time of, man, why do they have why did 2016 happen? Why did they go to monitored devices, entrapment devices? This is a great example of why. Because back in the day, prior to monitored devices, when those batteries went dead, there went your safety and your entrapment protection, right? So these gaps would absolutely come into play. The edge probably wasn't even working. Nobody even knew it wasn't working. And it became a real liability. All right. Another type of entrapment device can be a clutch or pressure relief device. Okay, this is for swing and barriers only. My PSA here is that just because it has a clutch doesn't mean it's a safety device. Okay, just because it has a pressure relief device doesn't mean it's a safety device. It may be there to protect the mechanics of the equipment, right? Protect the gearbox or something along those lines. So again, read the manual, make sure that if it has a clutch that is meant for safety, it will tell you that's the case and it needs to be adjusted. Regardless, it should be adjusted to protect the equipment, but it may not be an actual safety device. Okay. I'll kind of rally through this one. It's not very common, but it is applicable. So a type D is a constant pressure device. What this is saying that is, let's say you don't want to use photocells or edges or maybe even a type A. It's saying that you can permanently mount a button, an open close button, and to open the gate, you would press and hold that open button while that during that time the operator is going to be beeping. If I were to let go of that button, it would stop and I'd have to hit and hold the button again to continue open or closed for that matter. The idea is I'm looking at the gate, I'm making sure nobody's around, I don't have any entrapment issues, and if I did have somebody walk into the area, I could let go and it would stop. Okay. So not very practical for everyday use, but there is another use that is part of why this was implemented in the standard is let's say a photo beam goes bad or an edge goes bad and you've got a security situation or you've got an emergency situation, you need to get that gate open. Um, Many operators will allow you to open the gate via that method. Okay, so kind of override a broken safety feature. So little PSA at the bottom there, make sure your operator has this functionality if you plan to design a system that's going to use constant pressure, or you plan to use that in the case of an override if there is a safety issue or an issue with your safety devices. Not all operators have that functionality. Probably doesn't require a ton of time talking about it. Okay. So what UL 2016 says is it gives a base standard for how many safety devices you need on a gate. Okay. And it's saying we're going to call this the minimum standard. Okay. So the minimum standard says I need two means of entrapment protection in the opening direction and two means of entrapment protection in the closing direction. Pretty straightforward. Okay. The minimum standard says that. One type of entrapment protection, remember, in most gate operators, maybe all, is a type A, right? So it's already in the operator. That counts as one. Now, in the opening direction, I need to add a safety device, and in the closing direction, I need to add a safety device. Okay. Two main caveats I want to bring up. All right. On a swing gate, you see that little asterisk there. What they're saying in the swing gate is, hey, tell you what, if it opens up against nothing or it closes against nothing, there's no other entrapments there. You only have to add it in a second entrapment device in one direction. So your inherent works both directions. We're going to say, oh, all you got to do is add one in the closed direction to meet the minimum standard. Okay. Now, again, I'll say read the manual. UL gives kind of license to the operator manufacturer to say, yeah, you only have to look for a device in the open or closed, one or the other. That's all we care about. Some manufacturers say, no, you've got to put one in the closed. And if you have an entrapment in the open, put one there. Okay. All right. The second caveat is, yeah, that's the minimum standard. But wherever there is an entrapment that exists, you must have two forms of entrapment to protect that area. Okay. Remember, your type A is one. If an entrapment zone exists, we'll get into the definitions here shortly. You have to add an additional device. So that's, I know, like reading this and me saying it out loud, it maybe kind of makes sense. You kind of got to see it in application. We'll give you a couple applications here that we can test that explanation.
Hey, Zach, if I've met the minimum requirements for the operator to make it move, so I've got my two independent means for each direction of travel, yet I've identified another, say, entrapment in the open direction. And I say, you know what, I need to protect that. Do I have to use a monitor device to do that?
Great question. Yeah. I know it wasn't a question, but yes, it actually, I'm glad you brought it up because it does come up. Any entrapment zone that requires these two forms of protection, it must be a monitor device. Okay. So that's not to say I can't use a photo beam for vehicle protection,
Mhm.
right? So I can put a photo beam up there that's not monitored. I'm just there to, protect vehicles. These standards are in place to protect people, okay? However, if it's meant to protect people, it must be monitored.
That's the best way to answer it. If you're protecting people, it must be monitored. Barry asked a question, and this is in regards to swing gates. Some manufacturers claim that the internal counter is one device. Is this true? Maybe I'll take a stab at that. Barry, I'm not exactly sure what you mean by internal counter, but if the manufacturer lists that internal counter as a type A device, then the answer is yes.
Yeah, Tim gave you the proper answer there.
Yeah.
And, and yeah, you'll see, so RPM sensors can be a type A. And if they're counting, and all of a sudden they're not counting anymore, it's assuming that the gate stopped and hit something and it will reverse. So, but Tim's answer is the proper answer, and that's based on the manual.
Yep. What the manual says.
There are operators out there that have both RPM sensor and current sensing. So two type A's built in. All right, here's another example of the standards calling out exceptions. The exception to this minimum standard rule is a barrier operator. So if a barrier arm doesn't come within 16 inches of a fixed counterposing edge or surface in either the open or closed direction, you don't have to add any safety devices for people protection. I would still recommend it. There are known lawsuits out there of arms coming down on people, but that's a whole separate discussion. This is what the standard says. Okay. I think we won't dwell on this too long. But I think when 2016 hit, we had a lot of conversations out there about how many entrapment protection devices we need. I think we kind of hammered it, and you'll see some examples here coming up of how to apply it. But I'll take one more opportunity to say, just because you've met the minimum standard doesn't mean you have a safe installation, especially on slide gates. Very, at a minimum, you're probably going to have 3 devices, right? And you might have 6 devices. You might have 6 entrapment zones. We don't know, right? And that's why they kind of we hit this so hard in terms of being a minimum standard, because you're going to have other entrapment zones that need protection. And the gate operator manufacturer doesn't know what those zones are. The distributor doesn't know what those zones are. Really, it comes down to the designers of the system are going to have to identify these entrapment zones and protect them. Okay. But the main thing that gets cloudy is, we forget about the type A. We'll get that call often is, hey, my gate slide's closed. I have to put an edge and a beam to meet the two. No, not necessarily. The type A is one. Okay. All right. Nitty gritty of entrapment zones. I'm like Tim, I don't read PowerPoints, but I'm gonna read these verbatim, and you'll get the gist. Okay. So slide gate entrapment zone, locations between a moving gate and counter opposing edge or surface where entrapment is possible up to 6 feet above grade. Such locations occur if during any point in travel a gap between the moving gate and a fixed counter opposing edge or surface is less than 16 inches. Okay. The swing gate entrapment zone is more or less the same, with one exception in that it brings in exposed operator components. Okay. So to sum this up, the gate slides, swings, pivots within 16 inches of a fixed counter opposing edge or surface. You've got yourself an entrapment zone. Entrapment zone. And what do we know about entrapment zones? If we've got entrapment zones, we need 2 forms of protection: inherent and an additional. Swing gate, exposed operating components, you'll see it. If that swings within 16 inches of a fixed counterposing edge surface, you got yourself an entrapment zone. Let's apply it. So if we're live here, I'd be asking you, where are the entrapment zones? So just take a second and identify the entrapment zones on this slide gate. We've got a top view looking down. Okay. So, okay, you've now identified the entrapment zones. How are you going to protect it? Okay. So I'm going to offer up an example. Do we have an entrapment zone in the closed direction? Absolutely. Where that slide gate, the leading edge of that slide gate comes into the receiver post. Yes. Is a photo eye a good way to protect for that? Absolutely. Okay. Next, in the open direction, I think my animation's off here. Do I have an entrapment zone? Does that trailing edge, as we call it, does that slide within 16 inches of a fixed counter opposing edge or surface? Yeah, it's got the fence line that it's sliding past, right? Within 16 inches, I've got an entrapment zone back there. I have to protect it. In this case, they chose a photo beam. Fantastic, right? Are we done? No, we're not. And the one we're going to hammer in is that drawing post, okay? You've got to protect that drawing post. We filled the gap, great, but we still have an entrapment zone here. How would I protect that? And how come this photo beam isn't protecting it? Well, I tell you what, let's move the photo beam and get my pointer up here. I got a photo beam across here. Why don't I just move that photo beam right across this lane on the outside? Now I've protected the drawing post. Yes or no? I had this conversation with the veteran installers, okay? You got to remember how this operator reacts to this photo beam across the driveway. This drawing post is a danger when the gate is opening, right? Some kid hops on the gate, they're riding it open, and they get sucked into that opening. This photo beam does not react when the gate is opening. Typically, there could be a scenario with some operator where you wired it a certain way. But would you want that gate to react when the gate's opening? No, because what does every car do? They shoot that gap. As soon as they got enough room to get through, they're gone. We wouldn't stop that gate and close it on the car. So I'm going to go out on a limb here and say you must put a contact edge on this drawing post. You could get creative, maybe put a photo beam up there shooting down. Probably wouldn't last long. There might be another device out there that makes sense, but I'm going to say in 99.9% of the applications on a slide gate, this drawing post requires an edge. You must put an edge on it. You could hardwire that edge in, you could go wireless, but you need an edge on this drawing post. If you want to go another alternative method, that's the great thing about UL, like Tim said, is that they don't tell you exactly how to do it. They just say you got to protect the zone. I know I'm sitting here kind of letting that one linger and sit in a little bit because it's a little bit foreign. How am I doing on time, T?
You're doing great. We still got a half hour. So I'm glad you're letting it linger because I got a comment. We put that photo eye for the close and that photo eye for open. We have met the minimum standard that that gate operator needs to move. The manufacturer doesn't know what you've got going on. Distributor selling to you doesn't know what's going on. But if that's all you do is that photo eye for open and photo eye for close, this gate operator is going to run all day long every day. And you've left the most possible entrapment zone unprotected. Does it say in a manual that you need 3 devices? No, it does not say that. This is part of being that professional, and that's why I believe, most of you are on this call, is you want to read what's between the lines. You want to know what's between the lines. That spot right there needs. Now, let me ask you this. What if we put an edge, Zach, on that a drawing post? Which direction of travel of the gate are we trying to protect?
Open.
Open. And I also have a photo beam for the close. Well, then that would mean I don't need that photo eye in the open direction, right? No,
No.
no, it doesn't. As we see here with the red draw in post, this job right here, just on a very quick glance, has three entrapment zones. The operator only needs two. The site needs three. And I got a couple questions. Let me see.
Yeah, I got them.
Go ahead.
So first question is, why does the draw and post need an entrapment device if the gate meets the 2.25 spacing protocol, meaning there should be nothing to become entrapped by the gate? I'm glad you asked the question because, again, it was, I think, actually a misnomer for a long time that if you filled, actually, let me advance the slide because I got a slide on this one again, kind of reinforcing what Tim showed from an ASTM perspective. Um, So the question is around, I filled this gap like you see here. Why do I need an entrapment device as well? And the answer is I've got two standards. One is ASTM, which says fill the gap. And then I've got UL, which lays out what an entrapment zone is verbatim as you see on this slide, right? Nowhere in those two standards do they give an exception. Now, I'm not saying they should. I'm not saying they shouldn't. Maybe they should. I don't know, but that's not up to me. The standards say to do these two things, and that gate slides within 16 inches of that fixed counterposing edge or surface, so it must be protected. Now, I'll give you if that's filled and I get caught up in a gate, is it going to kill me? I don't know. Maybe not. Is it going to do some pretty big damage if I don't put a contact edge there? Um, probably even if I do put a contact edge in there, it might do some damage, but we're hoping not to. Looking to mitigate the injury or death. Is that a fair explanation, Tim?
Absolutely. Nope, that's
Okay.
exactly. It's one of those things that sitting here, with my coffee right by me and nice climate controlled office, we want to do all three. Um, that's the absolute perfect world. That is what I think the spirit of ASTM and UL325 stands for.
Yeah.
There was a couple of
Helps.
things. Um, Ricky said the photo, I think it's more making a statement than a question. The photo beam should be on the unprotected side of the gate. I don't think it's a question. I think it's more of a statement.
Yeah, and I mean from a entrapment protection perspective, do I still have my laser on?
Yep.
If I'm trying to protect this entrapment zone here. Like UL wouldn't care what side you put it on. I would tend to agree with Rick that your beam should, well, you'll get some that this could be debated,
Yeah.
right? But there's two forms of thought here is one is who's going to get hurt in the gate? Well, it's probably the person that's not educated on the gate. If you work here or live here, this gate's you know, a scary device. But if you're the public side may not, right? So it might make sense to put it on the what we call the unsecured side. Another school of thought would be, well, if I put it on the unsecured side, someone's going to throw a hat on it or kick it or vandalize it or whatever. But um, yeah.
Then Jay had a question. If the front curbside post is an entrapment, why isn't the rear post an entrapment?
Post.
Would
Like,
that be more there was like a cantilever gate that had two posts or?
hmm. Well, I'm not sure exactly. If there was a post back here, yes, it would be an entrapment. Now, you'd hope that your photo beam would protect that area, or you'd put a trailing edge here. Um, I mean, Tim, wouldn't you say that, your first thing you're considering with a slide gate is that leading edge, trailing edge. They're almost always gonna be an entrapment zone there, wherever those things are. And then we've got this or this drawing post, and then any other potential entrapment zones.
I think to answer Jay's question, and it's a valid question, is that front one that we're calling the draw-in post.
Hmm.
Um, what we're trying to protect there, in all honesty, is people reaching through the gate. We haven't got to the no control zone yet. Right there, if I reach through right there, there's a reason I'm reaching through. I'm trying to get to a button, some device to open the gate. As soon as I touch that big dumb animal, the gate operator goes. Boom, I'm getting pulled and broken arm, that kind of thing. On the rear post, I'm not going to say you don't have an entrapment there, but you don't have a reach through potential there, or you shouldn't have. How about that? So I think that's why we call out that draw and post there more than the others. Not to say if you feel that back one is an entrapment, protect it. Absolutely.
Hopefully we answered that for you, Jay. All right. So again, we're not live here, but just an example of a swing gate potential entrapment areas. We've got the curb could be considered an entrapment zone. The operator could be considered an entrapment zone. And remember, we've got these exposed operator components, and we have documented deaths with this arm coming out and pinching a person and killing them. So if this can't tell from this picture, quite frankly, if that arm comes within 16 inches of the wall, but if it does, that would be considered an entrapment zone. Okay. Maybe another look at it from the top view. These are the entrapment zones I'm considering for protection. Again, maybe this shows a photo beam utilized, doesn't have to be a photo beam. Oftentimes you'll see edges run along the bottom of this gate or on the leading edge. You could put an edge back here. UL doesn't tell you exactly how to do it. They just say you got to do it. All right. And entrapment zones are a big component of UL, but we're moving on to the next really important topic. It's really simple to understand, but the no control zone, what it says is I can't have any access controls within 6 feet of any part of the moving gate. Okay. So those little service switches we like to put on a gate operator, keypads, push buttons, card readers. You can't have any access controls that operate the gate operator within 6 feet of any part of the moving gate. Okay, you see kind of this moat built around the moving gate panel. Okay. The idea is if I don't give you a reason to reach through the gate, you won't. And I mean, this all kind of got kicked off. This whole thing kind of got kicked off in the 90s with somebody reaching through a gate, prominent person. Okay. So no control zone. This is pretty typical installation, especially on residential, right? Is this a violation of the no control zone? Yes. These are not okay. And I know, especially for you folks that are doing residential applications, you got tight situations. They want to take the garbage out. They want to walk through that gate. It's not built for pedestrian traffic. And this would be a direct violation of UL. And this would draw in some dangers, right? I'm standing on the inside. I don't have any way of getting out, and I just want to take the garbage out. Am I going to reach through there and throw a coat in real quick? Very well could happen. So these are violations of the no control zone. Here are a couple examples with, keypads or telephone entries. Those are okay, right? They're more than 6 feet away from the gate. It's as simple as that. Yeah, very. I'm with you.
Yeah.
It's a scary situation. All right, warning signs, everybody's favorite topic. What does UL say about warning signs? It says they must be mounted on both sides of the gate, visible, um, permanently mounted. I think it may say that. I'm not actually sure, but we always talk in those terms. Is a zip tie permanent? Yeah, some would say yes. But you've got to put these warning signs on each side of the gate and visible from each side. In this case, they're showing this is straight out of a ASTM document. They're putting it on the gate. Do I have to put it on the gate? No. In fact, I would say from the unsecured side, you're better off putting it on one of these fence panels, left or right, because when the gate's fully open, you still see that warning sign. Okay, so every installation, we want to put a warning sign on each side of the gate, visible, take a picture of it, document it. If you come back and service that gate, that warning sign's not there, let's put another one up, let's document it, um, and ensure we've met that part of the standard. And it has to be a manufacturer, an industry warning sign. It can't be your own warning sign. You can't make up your own warning sign. They're all very specific. That's part of the UL testing as well. Cool. Straightforward. Pedestrian access. So let's clear this one up a little bit. What the standard says is that you must provide pedestrian access and promote pedestrian usage of that pedestrian access. Okay. It does not state I must have a pedestrian gate. All right. It doesn't really state anything at all other than you need to provide pedestrian access because this is an automated vehicle gate operator, not to be used for pedestrians. So, and we cannot put a pedestrian in contact with the gate with our said pedestrian access. Okay. It doesn't give a distance. If you do use a pedestrian gate, it doesn't say, hey, it needs to be 6 feet away. But it can't put you in contact with any part of that moving gate. I should have put some images up here, Tim, but it didn't. You often see a pedestrian gate built into a slide gate, right? And, you know, the argument is, well, I'll put a switch on it or something like that. It's not allowed. Straight up not allowed. Um, so we've also seen pedestrian gates in this stacking area where the gate slides past through the fence line and pedestrian access in that area. That would be a violation. It can't put you in contact with any part of that moving gate. So there's certainly some best practices in terms of adding your pedestrian gate. Maybe you hinge it off this latch post rather than have the handle right here next to the slide gate. But for UL purposes, it doesn't really call that out. Okay.
Yeah. I think a couple things here to take away that this garners sometimes a lot, especially in residential, it garners a lot of angst. I don't want to do it. First off, we sell vehicular gate operators only. None of these gate operators are meant or tested for pedestrians. They are meant for vehicles only. Now we know that pedestrians are going to use them. We know it. That's why we just spent the better part of 2 hours talking about how to protect. If you notice, we didn't talk about loops. We didn't talk anything about vehicle detection. This was all about people protection, but we're selling vehicular gates only. We know they're going to do it. A little misnomer is you are not required to put in a pedestrian gate. You're required to put in a pedestrian access point. Just so you know, you don't have to put in a gate. It can just be a walkway like that picture. I hate that word pedestrian gate. You can put a gate, you can put access control on the gate. Or it can be just an opening like that with no gate. It just has to be to promote pedestrian usage. Question I'll get, Zach, sometimes I'll let you answer it is, what if there is no pedestrian access at this opening?
I don't want to answer that one, Tim.
It's a tough one.
A guy I respect a lot used to say, UL and ASTM doesn't care about your problems.
Yep.
So, I can't, that's where you've got some business decisions to make, or you got to get creative. I
Yep.
would say most of the time it's possible. Yeah, it's possible. They just don't want to spend the money to do it, or they're going to have to really redesign something to provide that pedestrian access. But at the end of the day, UL doesn't care. you've got to provide it.
Murphy asked a question I think you answered, but it'll be worth doing again. If the pedestrian gate is in the gate path, like in the area of an opening side of a slide gate, and it has an interlock device wired into the gate operator, will that still be a violation? I'll answer that. Yes, not only is it a violation, you don't do it. And I get your point. I used to, back in the day, Murphy, I used to design pedestrian gates into automatic gates, and I would design a stop switch or a kill switch, so that if the pedestrian gate was being used, there's no way the automatic gate could work. I can still do that today. You can do that. The problem is if somebody can come behind you and wire around that, and you don't know that, and you're the one that built or worked on this gate with this pedestrian gate in there. So the answer is no, no pedestrian gates can come in contact with the automatic gate in any way.
Yeah, it's literally written into the standard. Locate the gate such this person will not come in contact with the vehicular gate during the entire path of travel of the vehicular gate. Yeah. It's a good question though, because you see a lot of that out there. And,
Yep.
could you make it safe? I mean, it's really no reason to debate it.
Yeah.
So we got some resources here. We'll send those out to you. We also have, I should have put it in here, a ton of great resources on CPSGU online. Again, free to join, no subscription required. And you can get access to some of those resources. Many manufacturers have created checklists. DASMA has created checklists. I know some safety device manufacturers have created checklists. They're great. You can access those through the either the DASMA site or the manufacturer specifically. So, but yeah, can't stress enough this that DASMA website with the technical data sheets is an amazing resource. So our goal on the UL side was to have you leaving knowing how to identify entrapment zones and protect them. I hope that that is clear. That gate swing slides pivots within 16 inches of a fixed counterposing edge or surface, that is an entrapment zone. Okay. And we're going to protect that with a B1 or a B2 in tandem with that type A, right? The draw-in post, that's probably been hammered in. The draw-in post, the draw-in post, the draw-in post. We got to protect it. It doesn't matter if it's filled. We've got to protect it. Most likely that's going to be a contact edge, right? And if we design it right, we can just hardwire that thing right into the operator. Can't always do that, but we try to. Okay. The no control zone, I can't have any access controls within 6 feet at any part of that moving gate. Straight up.
There was one caveat to that we didn't mention, and I'm surprised no one brought it up.
Ah, you're right.
Um, the no control zone. There is an exception, and it's clearly stated out, an emergency access device. If the fire department requires an emergency access device, they dictate where it goes. We don't, they do. Um, Question begs, well, why isn't that a violation? The reason why is the only one that has access to that device is the emergency department. The end user, the installer, the GC, the AHJ, me, Zach, I don't have access to that emergency access device.
That's
So
right.
therefore, I can't operate the gate even if I'm touching it.
Does that make sense? So your siren operated systems, your
A knock switch, the
Knox, all that
quick
stuff's
damage,
okay.
Comar, all of them.
Yeah.
You're going to send out, it will ask, are you going to offer a PDF of the slides from today's webinar?
We don't typically send all the slides out, but we will have a full recording and some other supporting documentation that should get you pretty close there, Murphy. Yeah. We've got a couple like little, quiz type things that we could go through here, but again, with a kind of webinar format, I don't think it's really as effective, but we'll certainly open it up to Q&A. Feel free to ask some provocative questions. Happy to address those. Again, typically in the live sessions, we'll get a fair amount of those provocative questions, usually around things that they don't like about the standard or they'd like to see changed. On that thread, who can change the standard? The truth of the matter is, any of you can challenge the standard, recommend changes to the standard through the UL Standards and Technical Panel, the ULSTP. So yeah, that's a possibility. So, and when we've had it happen before, where people from outside that panel have affected change with
Mhm.
the standards. So if they're, I can tell you this, that if the recommendation makes a gate less safe, it's not going to get a lot of attention. But there is a lot of conversation around other forms of safety devices, laser-based, microwave-based devices. That technology has grown immensely. It's awesome technology. It could be even safer than a lot of the methods that we use today. And language has been drafted, and it should hit UL here pretty soon, where we're able to use other types of safety devices. Another big topic is those residential applications where there's not a lot of room for pedestrian access. Is there a way that we can make a gate operator safe enough to also allow pedestrians to go through? And it's not outside the realm of possibility. The standard hasn't been drafted fully yet, but if we adopted some of the pedestrian door type standards to that particular operator, it'd probably get a different classification. Like we have class 1 through 4. We didn't even bother talking about those today, but it might be a class 5 or something like that, where it's a different operator built to a different classification, having slightly different requirements. But I can tell you this, right, Tim? Like you and I have been teaching this a long time, and I would say up until 2016, if I sat 100 people in a room and asked them to raise their hands, hey, how many of you feel pretty good about understanding these standards? Two hands would go up.
Yeah.
Nowadays when I go to shows or we go teach this in a live format, people are pretty well educated on the topic. I mean, it's come a long, long ways in the last what now, 8 years or so.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still amazed. There's 70 people on this call. So it shows me a commitment by people that want to have, they want to make safer gates. That's just impressive. This many years later, still getting that. That education is wanted. So I want to, certainly say thank you all to come. I mean, time is extremely valuable, and you took 2 hours out of your day to come to this. That says a lot about you folks. Thank you.
No, it is impressive for sure.
Mhm.
Well, with that, Tim, we'll send out those post webinar notes. Give us a couple days to get those out. We'll get you the resources. I'll give you Tim's home phone number. Call him on the weekends.
Yeah.
And honestly, if I know Tim, he'd take the call happily.
Yeah.
So please reach out to us. I see one more question maybe in here.
I think it was more of a suggestion to the UL STP.
Yeah, maybe limit the gate movement to 4 feet and require it to be triggered by both entry and exit. No vehicle attracted. Oh yeah. So we actually, I mean, so we do have pedestrian gate operators today available now. All right. A couple
Mhm.
different manufacturers that we offer. At that point, it applies to different safety requirements. Um, 156.10 or 156.19 for pedestrian safety. So those gate operators just have a slightly different standard. Um, the proposed, for UL 325 was a whole nother type of gate that would service both pedestrians and vehicles. We're not there yet. I don't know if we'll ever get there, quite frankly, but it has been kicked out there. But yeah, I agree with you, Rick. There's probably ways that we could do that. Yep.
Any other questions out there, comments?
Take advantage of our safety promo going on
Yeah.
our website. June Safety 10 is the coupon code. Get you 10% off all your safety devices through the end of the month. Just got to place them by the last day of June.
June 30th.
So not often we have a 10 off deal. So
So,
definitely take advantage of that. All right. Tim, thanks for hosting with me.
thank you, Zach, very much for putting it on. Thank you all for attending.
You guys all have a great day.